Welcome to the Calder Farmstead.
Now the Ice Hawks back out to center in transition. Carlson with Quenneville 2-on-1. Right when Carlson comes, Quenneville scores!
Here's a chance for Carrick. Fighting scores! Off the face-off! Up it's Eminger. Pulled back to Werenski. Has it. Shoots one. Bounces off a man. 5 seconds left. Werenski. Another jam on the shot. Turning and firing. They go! Scores! They score! Now they catch each other. They both go right over the top. Matching rights to one another. McDermott gets the helmet off of Cassie.
And now with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out right side with Bear. Looks like cutting to the net. Bear will score!
And here are your hosts, Cece and Sean.
Well, hello and greetings from the Mile High city of Denver, Colorado.
And Bloomington, Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, you betcha. Welcome to the Calder Farmstead Podcast, episode number 64, Nintendo 64, that is, for Tuesday, November 30th, 2021. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring a guide to composting your Thanksgiving Day leftovers, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast. My name is CC Hockley, the AHL editor of Full Press Hockey.
And I'm Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And remember, kids, it's only a model. Thank you all for tuning in with us. We always appreciate it.
And if you're new to hearing CC and I talk about hockey, we'd normally be recapping the weekend here, but because of the holiday, we're going to take a bigger picture spin here. We both watch a lot of AHL games, and we're going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you may want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're newer to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check that out, so you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes. And let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes today trying to get advance tickets for Spider-Man No Way Home. You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey?
First and foremost, we have a bit of news, a bit of surprising news coming out of San Jose in the Bay Area. Evander Kane has been assigned to the San Jose Barracuda, to the AHL, and that's not just the kicker. The kicker is he plans to report. And I don't know how closely you all have been following Evander Kane's career up to this point, or at least with the San Jose Sharks. But we're gonna recap a little bit for you. Kane was suspended 21 games by the NHL for submitting a fake COVID vaccination card. Yikes. Exit interviews at the end of last season had multiple players commenting on Kane and his disregard for club rules. Not good when you lose the locker room. Mentally, I'm remembering the picture of Dustin Byfuglien giving Kane the finger when he's trying to give him some props in the hallway a few years ago when they both played in Winnipeg. Anyway, I digress. Kane has also been alleged to bet on hockey games, including Sharks games, as well as has some domestic violence and sexual assault allegations. The gambling investigation done by the NHL did not find corroborating evidence that Kane bet on Sharks games. And shockingly,
bookies aren't the most forthcoming of witnesses. Who would have guessed?
Yeah. Who would have guessed? Kane did file for bankruptcy in January, citing $1.5 million in gambling losses and failed to pay a $500,000 casino loan in Vegas last year. So again, that is just a very small capsule and sample size of the craziness that has been going on in Evander Kane's career. But most recently, that's the bullet points, as it were.
That's basically how we got to here, and he's going to apparently report to the Barracuda.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by that fact too. Mostly because I would have thought at this point in his career, he'd just hold out for a trade to somewhere. But if he's going to report to the, across the hallway, as it were, good for him, I guess. But he's repeatedly shown to be a locker room disruption and a pretty shit person. He's been arrested on criminal trespassing and harassment charges in Buffalo, investigated for sexual assault in Buffalo, multiple allegations that he walked out on checks while with the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg. He's made homophobic comments, and he's repeatedly shown with his actions that he doesn't think teams' rules apply to him, not just in San Jose, but also Winnipeg and Buffalo. During the 2012 lockout, he went to the KHL, and after 12 games, his KHL team, quote, mutually parted ways with Kane. The KHL didn't want him. And that's a league that has happily accepted many a bag of shit in the hockey world and couldn't stand Evander Kane for even 1 month. All of that being said, Evander Kane is still a pretty good hockey player, but that's not really the most important factor. But here we are. I have no idea how this is going to go for the Barracuda, and it remains to be seen how much effort in the AHL he's going to put forth, because he was also someone who has at times very clearly been going through the motions. Personally, if I were in charge of the San Jose organization, I would not want him within, 1 light year of my prospects. But I guess he's going to be now. I would be trying to ship him to some other AHL club, an independent one. I think maybe I could see a world in which the Chicago Wolves or Milwaukee Admirals or maybe even the Phantoms took him on as a, outside team loan, which is not without precedent. I mean, it is probably for those clubs, but Josh Hosang being shipped out to San Antonio, as well as Jordan Binnington doing the same thing. San Antonio, obviously, no longer appearing in this season, but still sending guys to not your designated AHL team is not without precedent in this league. And I am shocked that the Sharks did not do that with Evander Kane. Evander Kane has also been given multiple fresh starts and multiple chances and continues to just be an off-ice problem everywhere he goes. He was one in Buffalo. He was one in Winnipeg. He was one in Atlanta. He's been one in San Jose.
Atlanta. That is a name I haven't heard in a long time. Sorry. Continue.
But I can imagine a way in which he suddenly decided that this is the last straw and he's going to clean up his act, but I will be the absolute last person on the Evander Kane is a new man wagon, because I have seen this movie many a time before, and it's always gone, this way. So we'll see what happens in the Barracuda locker room, but I would not want him near my prospects if I were that organization, especially at this point.
Sean, we're going to talk later on in this episode about kind of the Thanksgiving standings snapshot that we hear a lot about in the NHL, at the NHL level, how if teams are not in playoff position by the time Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, for our Canadian viewers, if a team is not in the playoff spot by US Thanksgiving, then they're probably statistically not going to make the playoffs. And that does trickle down to the AHL and the ECHL. We'll get there. But with that in mind, San Jose, currently 9th out of 9 teams in the Pacific Division, the glutted Pacific Division, as I've said many a time on the podcast. But Abbotsford is 8, San Jose Barracuda is 9, so 5, 8, 1, and 0, just 11 points with a .393 points percentage. And so with Evander Kane coming to the club, I mean, I have my own personal prediction. I mean, if he behaves and is a good team player and just goes above and beyond to try and clean up his act, as it were, which I don't know if it necessarily is going to happen, but if that does happen miraculously, I mean, that's going to be a huge benefit to San Jose for sure. But my opinion, he's probably not going to last. I'm going to say in between 5 to 10 games. I think your suggestion to transfer him to another AHL team, an independent one, obviously. Again, Lehigh Valley is hurting very bad. That's another team that's not doing very well in the AHL standings. I think that idea is going to come to fruition. Obviously not right now, but I think he lasts maybe 5 or 10 games. They find out how problematic he is, and then he gets shipped off somewhere else. That's my 2 cents. That's what I'm predicting is going to occur.
I could see that. I see a lot of different outcomes here. I think there's at least one where it all works out and he goes, becomes a model citizen and gets, to come back and play for the Sharks. I think that's super unlikely, but It's not impossible. It's 2021. I've learned that all outcomes are possible. But I think there's a chance he gets transferred to another AHL club. I think there's a chance he plays like 7 games and has just such a bad attitude that he decides, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to sit and wait to be traded somewhere. And the Sharks are forced to deal him pennies on the dollar, retaining half his salary because nobody's touching that contract as is. That's why he passed through waivers. If he's making $1.5 million, 5 teams are signing up to take him on waivers. But for $7 million, nah, that ain't happening. Nobody's jumping on that bullet. So he's gonna if he's gonna get moved, San Jose's gonna have to retain half that salary, and they're gonna get pennies on the dollar for him. But I could see a world in which he doesn't get transferred to another club and ends up just sitting out after 7 games. I could see him getting moved after probably about 7 or 8 games. And I could also see him just blowing up the AHL and looking, like a guy who's scored, 70 points in an NHL season before, blowing up the AHL like he should, and getting, traded on merit and at least doing something to kind of, rebuild his reputation a little bit. But that of all of them seems like the second least likely, with him rejoining the Sharks being the least likely. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it at this point.
Well, and it's interesting, we're mentioning independent teams here, Sean, and, Lehigh Valley, obviously not doing well. They are an independent team. They're not owned by the Philadelphia Flyers, which was a common mistake in hockey circles, as you'd think as a team as the Phantoms so closely tied to the Flyers, to their NHL parent club. Another one is the Colorado Eagles. Colorado, not owned by the Avalanche. They are an independent team. And so I doubt Colorado would take, once the forward core gets healthy in Colorado, they will be fine. They did have to play Rob Hamilton, a defenseman, as a forward during the Stockton series this past weekend. So they are hurting at the forward position, but I doubt Colorado would take on a project or at least a thorn like Evander Kane. But you look at the other divisions, Milwaukee is 7th out of 7 in the Central. Syracuse, whose jersey you're donning right now, is also at the bottom of the North Division. So it's you have these teams that could utilize Evander Kane should he behave and not be a locker room cancer. But that's a big if. That's a big if and a big ask.
I still think Chicago is my fit here. I could see Milwaukee as well, just because Nashville, their parent club, very much has the reputation of island of misfit toys. But I think they've at least started to shed that a little bit, and I don't think it necessarily applies to Milwaukee, whereas Chicago has at many a turn shown we're going to do what's best for us, and your prospects are going to get there along the way. Whereas I could see if Syracuse tried to take him, Tampa would just be like, I'm sorry, you're going to do what now? No. And I understand they're an independent club. They have that ability, but I think that would definitely not be something Tampa would be thrilled with. And I think Syracuse cares what Tampa is. Whereas Chicago, I'm not saying Chicago doesn't care what Carolina thinks or Milwaukee, Nashville, but I think there is a different relationship there. And Chicago has always shown oh yeah, we'll play your prospects, but we're also going to sign 4 veterans that are going to be able to, put pucks in the net regardless of what you send us. So this feels like a much closer to on-brand move for the Wolves than anything else. But again, I definitely don't think he's going to the Eagles, just because I think that would still put him in a position to, go physically check Barracuda players in games. And I don't think the Sharks want any chance of that happening. So if they send him somewhere, it will be outside, mountain time zone.
That's fair. And to address the elephant in the room, woo, sorry, got a little something in my throat there. To address the elephant in the room, sports gambling is legal in Colorado. Not to say that, sorry, not to say that
it is in Pennsylvania as well. So Lehigh Valley's probably out.
Yeah, not to say that he has partaken in that behavior, but the allegations, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and swims like a duck,
Well, I mean, he's definitely bet on sports. The question that he was cleared on was, did he bet on hockey? And again, bookies shockingly did not show up for their court date to testify against him. Weird. But it's sports gambling legal in Pennsylvania. know that from personal experience. But I don't think so. I guess that would rule Lehigh Valley out. I have no idea what sports gambling laws are like in Wisconsin or Illinois. I think Illinois, it's illegal. I don't know about Wisconsin. So guess what, Milwaukee? It's down to you.
Yeah, I mean, you have one, locker room problematic guy and Matt Duchene up in Nashville. Why not put one in Milwaukee? I mean, for obviously different reasons, but
I mean, we're getting off the rails here. So we're going to head to break. I feel like we've exhausted our Evander Kane coverage here.
Correct.
We're going to head to break. After the break, we will get to the Thanksgiving Day playoff implications. If you're just here for Evander Kane news, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media, as well as all of the popular podcast places and YouTube, can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
All righty. Like I mentioned in the previous segment, for those of you that came over from the other side of the ad break, a lot has been made about playoff positions at American Thanksgiving and how predictive of the final playoff teams that is. And again, it's at the NHL level, but to some extent, it's also at the AHL, ACHL levels too. But again, being an AHL podcast, we're going to focus on the American Hockey League level. So the AHL decided to open up the playoff qualifications this season so that the last two teams in each division did not make it, which throws the Thanksgiving playoff spot in a bit of a question mark. So we decided to go back and see what this would have looked like since the Pacific Division became the Pacific Division in 2015 with that mass exodus of franchises out west, and how the standings at Thanksgiving looked compared to the final standings and what that meant in terms of the AHL's new cash grab. Playoff system.
So back in the 2015-16 season, going through to the 18-19 season, which is the last season to have real playoffs, at least one team in the bottom two of the division managed to get what would be a now playoff spot. Cash grab. The only outlier in all of those seasons was the 15-16 Central Division, where Manitoba and Iowa were the bottom two teams at Thanksgiving and finished the season still there. Now, there are some limitations on the way that we kind of looked at this. The first being the obvious, the league's expanded. The Pacific Division only had 7 or 8 teams in previous years and now has 9. So that means there's a little bit more, people in the game. The other is that at the end of the season, teams that were, in 6th place, in 5th place, and maybe out of what was the traditional playoff spots weren't maybe fighting, for those playoff positions. They took their foot off the gas, played some younger guys because their season was basically over. Whereas this season, that won't be the case. Now, those two asterisks aside, I think we have an interesting look here.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not to say that this dive into past season standings isn't useful, but I mean, we're going to look at it with a grain of salt and maybe a bit of lime, definitely don't want to drink too much of that Corona, as it were. But that all being said, if one team from the bottom two of each division is likely to get into the playoffs, talking about playoffs, who do we think makes the leap to the playoffs and who do they replace? As always, we'll go east to west, and we're going to start with the Atlantic Division. So over in the Atlantic, at Thanksgiving, Bridgeport and Lehigh Valley were the bottom two teams. Do you think one of them makes a move up in the standings, and who would they replace if they did?
Yeesh. Those are my options, Bridgeport and Lehigh Valley.
Yep.
I guess I'm going to go Bridgeport here, but that's a real gun to my head kind of choice. I could easily see this being the second division in, in a handful of seasons since we looked at this, that the bottom two stay the bottom two. But I think Bridgeport at least has a shot here, whereas Lehigh Valley is a mess. I don't think they're very likely to improve, especially with Morgan Frost gone and questionable to ever come back to Lehigh Valley. A lot of their depth right now are, ECHL guys, and not even like good ECHL guys, just the ones they had access to. Their goaltending is a mess, and while I think John Gillies will help stabilize that a little bit, it still has not been too great. A lot of their younger players like Cam York, Igor Zamula on the blue line have been underwhelming this season and have not quite found the same magic they did last year. I think York will be okay, and Zamula is starting to round into form, but like not in the same caliber they looked last year. They've been, Lehigh Valley has been murdered by the injury bug times 1,000. So the question is going to become, can, Jerry Mayhew, Max Woolman, and Cal O'Reilly carry this team to a 7th seed kicking and screaming? And so far, it sure doesn't look like it. Bridgeport, on the other hand, has talent that's underwhelmed. Someone needs to find out what's going on with Samuel Bolduc, as he's 0 for the season so far. Reese Newkirk has also not been very good. The New York Islanders have had major COVID and injury problems, which at least gives me some hope that once those are resolved, should they be resolved, the cavalry will come for the Sound Tigers. They are also handcuffed, though, because they have Brent Thompson as a head coach, who's bad. I don't think we've been mixed words too much about that. They have had decent goaltending, though, and should they, get guys like Newkirk and Bolduc to, find their game, get some reinforcements, maybe get Robin Salo back, get some of the other guys they've had to, send up to the Islanders because of COVID and injury issues. I could see them at least making moves. If they're going to jump, if Bridgeport is going to jump a team here, I think we all know who I'm going to pick. It's Wilkes-Barre Scranton. While Wilkes-Barre Scranton has definitely gotten some reinforcements as Pittsburgh has gotten healthy, I still think of like the teams in the Atlantic Division, they are the weakest, or at least second weakest, when at full strength. Hershey will eventually, get guys back. They're going to get guys back from the Caps. They're going to get guys back. No one is out long term that should keep Hershey as depleted as they are. So I believe Hershey will, at bare minimum, make a playoff spot. Maybe not the one we thought they would at the beginning of the season, but they should at least, get enough bodies back where they can ice an AHL roster. Whereas I still am not a big believer in Wilkes-Barre Scranton, even at the peak of their powers. I believe Charlotte, has enough depth and ability to roll lines and D pairings that they should still be a contender, even if they aren't quite what we thought they would be at the beginning of the season. But that is my take on the Atlantic Division. CC, do you have any differing thoughts?
I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. Bridgeport, they just, to me, they seem much more likely than Lehigh Valley to sneak in and grab a playoff spot. And I really think that, Charlotte isn't being as dominant as I think I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. And so them being so close to the bottom of the standings there, in 6th place, right now it's a very top and bottom heavy. Well, maybe not heavy, but you look at the top of the Atlantic Division, you've got Springfield, you've got Hartford, 0.789 points percentage, 0.722 points percentage. You have a bit of a drop to Providence at 0.588 points percentage. And then you have Hershey, 0.559, Wilkes-Barre Scranton, 0.500, even, 500. And then Charlotte is 0.474. And then you take another dip, almost it is a total points percentage, by 0.001 off, but you go from 0.474 to 0.375 to Bridgeport. And, I guess it's not a whole lot of catching up to do points wise, because Bridgeport's 15, Charlotte and Wilkes-Barre Scranton are 18. So I think I'm gonna differentiate a little bit from what you were saying in that Charlotte and Wilkes-Barre Scranton. I think Bridgeport, if they get hot, I think they could leapfrog either one of those teams. And I know you think Wilkes-Barre Scranton is a fake team, and they're not they're not legit this season, which is, from the evidence you've presented, a fair assessment. But I think Bridgeport, looking at they suffered 6 losses in a row in November, and then they finally pulled one out to finish the month against Lehigh Valley. But Sean, let me ask you this. If Bridgeport undergoes a coaching change mid-season.
Oh, then all bets are off. Then, yeah, they can definitely do it.
Okay. Because that's what I think is going to happen.
Oh, see, I think he's going to – I think Brent Thompson manages – unless they really go into free fall, which still possible, but I feel like he's going to be able to get the pass. I'm like, well, look how many of my guys Barry Trotz and the Islanders took. What was I supposed to do? I'm playing, half an ECHL team here. I think he's going to be able to lean on that excuse to at least get him through the season. Should, though, he get Calvary back and they're still terrible and they fire him, all bets are off then. I think they have a pretty good shot at least leapfrogging one of them. I also want to say, in support of my Wilkes-Barre Scranton as a fake team, they are 3-7 in their last 10.
Oh, you hate to say I told you so, but you're going to say it, aren't you?
I love saying that.
Of course you do. All right, well, that's the Atlantic Division. Shall we bump over to the North Division, shall we? Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, at Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, Belleville and Syracuse were the bottom two squads in the North Division. Currently, the B-Sens have leaped over Laval, but we're going to go with the Thanksgiving Day standings, so we're going to stay true to that. Do you think one of Belleville or Syracuse makes a move up the standings? And if so, who would they replace?
I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see either of them leap over Laval. Laval has really not been the team we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season, although I will say, in our defense, we had goaltending concerns about them. Like, we thought, they'd be able to roll four lines, they'd get enough out of the defense, but it was like, are they going to be able to get enough out of Caden Primo and Michael McNiven to make the most of that? And while we were wrong about, them being able to roll four lines and get good defensive depth, we were spot on that their Achilles heel has basically been goaltending. And when it comes down to it, I believe in Belleville and Syracuse's goaltending a lot more than Laval. Caden Primo continues to be a league average-ish goalie, and Michael McNiven is worse than that, which I don't think is a shock to anyone. Belleville is going to inevitably get reinforcements once Ottawa finally puts its COVID problems in the rearview mirror, and thankfully no one seems to be suffering long-term consequences from testing positive or having COVID in Ottawa, as far as I know. I doubt Syracuse ever sees Boris Kachuk or Taylor Radish come back, as they're pretty sure they have to pass through waivers, and I'm pretty sure Cal Foote does too. And Tampa, having experience with what happened with Alex Barré-Boulet, I think it seems really unlikely that they try and test those waters again by putting someone they kind of want to hang on to through waivers. So Syracuse might not get those reinforcements, but I think there's enough on the roster to be a competitive team if they can get Hugo Alnefelt to adjust to the North American game a little bit better. Max Lagacé has gotten back healthy and has started to play, so that should give them at least some semblance of solid goaltending. Amir Miftakov has been a lot more impressive than I would have expected, but Belleville and Syracuse's special teams have also been pretty good, whereas Laval's have been kind of bad. And while, yeah, that can easily trend the other way with a shift or two here, Laval's also had some of their big offseason moves struggle so far this season. Kevin Waugh hasn't been great. Neither has Danik Martel. Neither has Gabriel Bork. And with Montreal looking like they're going to turn the rest of the season into garbage time, they could call up the Utes, who are showing promise for extended looks. That could be Jesse Ullinen or Raphael Harvey-Pinard or Caden Primo gone for extended time. And while, yeah, I just called Primo a league average goaltender, that means it's Michael McNiven and whoever's on the Lions. That's definitely a downgrade.
I believe it's Kevin Poulin, who just got relegated back to the Lions today.
I'll take Caden Primo over either of them any day of the week. So that's not good. And if they go up for extended time for Montreal to at least see what they have in them, that's bad for Laval, whereas Syracuse at least seems to be holding steady, even though Tampa's beat up like crazy, and Belleville is going to be probably getting guys back. So in terms of making swings upward, those three teams look like ships passing in the night. If I had to pick someone else from the North Division, should both Syracuse and Belleville make it, I think my money is on Cleveland. And I know that that's kind of a hot take, but if I have to pick someone from Toronto, Rochester, Cleveland, and Utica, I'm taking Cleveland from that group. Toronto at least seems like they're getting it together, whereas Cleveland seems like they're kind of treading-ish water. And with Daniil Tarasov not being as sharp as everyone expected, and JF Berube looking suddenly a lot sharper than everyone expected. I mean, if Berube, reverts to what he's looked like the past 2.5, 3 seasons, they're in trouble. Like, they have not clicked on offense the way you would have thought. Their defense has not been able to move the puck as well as you would have thought. Like, there are good parts to that team, but if I've got to pick one of those 4 teams to, fall into a tailspin, I'm taking Cleveland in that group, even though that's, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not expecting it, but if I got to take one, Cleveland's my guy there.
There was there's a marketing ploy that the ECHL's Brampton Beast employed when they came into the CHL, and that was bringing in a roster full of Canadian players, or at least players from Ontario. And I'm sure, as you probably have guessed, that did not go very well. And I feel like the province of Quebec, at least in regards to the Montreal affiliation tree, just seeing all of these French Canadian players just migrate to sign either with the Laval Rocket this season or with the Trois-Rivières Lions on two-way contracts, between the AHL and the ECHL. I think that's going to be Laval's downfall. I mean, I know that they signed some notable names that happen to be French Canadian players, but, when you lose your head coach to the San Diego Gulls and you have to bring in a new guy, and then you have this marketing ploy to bring all these Quebecois into your ECHL, AHL, minor league teams. I think Laval ends up being one of the bottom two in the North Division. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say another Canadian team is going to end up. I'm going to say Syracuse and Belleville both make the playoffs this season. And I'm going to say Toronto does not. And I'll tell you why. Because Eric Shalgren got hurt. And depending on how long he's out for, like, that kid was showing out, like completely showing out. Michael Hutchinson has not done well since Shalgren has gone down. Hutchinson has not done well. And I mean, they're losing games back and forth. They're about at a 500 clip, but if they keep doing that, and if they have to rely on Michael Hutchinson and Keith Petruzzelli, then I don't think that that's going to bode well for the Marlies. And if Shalgren's out for the season, or a good majority of the season, then my bet's going to be Marlies and Rocket as the two teams that don't make the playoffs in the North Division.
Interesting take. I will say too, since you brought it up, and the Montreal Canadiens fired Marc Bergevin today.
They did.
Yes, they definitely, I understand the influx of Quebecois players. I mean, how do you not take Danik Martel and Kevin Waugh? Those should have been two things that worked out for them, and they just aren't. For whatever reason. They're not getting on the board. But requiring your head coach and GM and whatever to be bilingual and speak French really limits your pool of available talent. Mm-hmm. And especially when you already fired, the one guy who was probably the most competent bilingual coach available in Claude Julien, and then you ditched another incredibly capable bilingual coach in Joël Bouchard. Mm-hmm. You're not just cutting the pool down of guys that you can have take their place, but you've also probably lost the best two candidates from that pool that you already had. So that's always kind of been a problem. And I understand why they think that they need that, because it's a French speaking market and so on. But at what point are you going to just make the best decision for hockey ops that is the best decision for hockey ops, and not just the best decision for your out-facing media? I understand desiring a French speaking coach or GM or whatever, but requiring it, I mean, hire an English speaking guy and get him some Rosetta Stone lessons in the off season. It's I don't think it needs to be a hard and fast requirement, more of we would prefer if you spoke some French. That's dumb.
It's like a minor league team, hiring an old alumni as a coach.
Oh, CC teams don't do that. Come on.
Oh, right. You're right. Never happens at the minor league level. Never happens at the NHL level, for crying out loud.
No, nobody would ever give a head coaching job or a front office job in the AHL or the NHL to someone with no experience doing that job. It's not like Danny Briere's interviewing to be the GM of the Montreal Canadiens or anything. That would be silly.
It's not like Patrick Waugh's name is getting floated for GM of. as unrealistic as that may be, but I mean, such a bastion of Montreal Canadiens glory. It's like, yeah, I mean, someone that survived through Patrick Waugh as the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, I can attest.
I think we've done a good job here getting the North Division done. That covers the Eastern Conference for us. We're going to take a break here and get to the Western Conference on the other side of things. If you're just here for the Eastern Conference, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Fun fact, all of our social medias are not identical. We post some memes that are strictly on Instagram or strictly on Facebook or strictly on Twitter. Most overlap, but not the whole thing. So you might want to check out all of them to see all of our fun stuff. Links to all of our social media, as well as all of our podcast places, can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills. We will be right back.
All righty. We've got the Eastern Conference taken care of in regards to our Thanksgiving Day breakdown in the standings. Let's head over to the West. Let's head over to the Central Division. At Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, Rockford and Milwaukee were the bottom two teams in the Central Division. Currently, Rockford has leaped Texas, but again, we are going with the snapshot of the Thanksgiving Day standings. So as it was on Thursday, Rockford and Milwaukee in those bottom two spots. Do you think one of Rockford or Milwaukee, or maybe both, makes a move up the standings? And who, if they do, who are they going to replace?
I mean, at some point, I've got to believe Milwaukee's going to get its act together, right? Like, there's too much talent on paper for that team to be this bad. They don't appear to be the team we thought they were in the preseason, but I refuse to believe that they're just going to be a bag of suck the whole year. If I had to pick them to leap a team, I think my first contender is actually not going to be Texas or Rockford. It's going to be Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids has a lot of parts of their game. Like, they have good players, but there are definitely elements where I'm like, is this going to be able to hold up the whole season? Is Calvin Pickard going to be this good the entire time? Is Ryan Murphy going to be able to sustain the entire blue line in terms of puck moving talent? I mean, is Detroit going to be calling up guys like Jonathan Bergeron and keep them there? Also, fair question. The Griffins special teams too have fallen off a cliff, Wile E. Coyote style. The last I looked, before going into this past Thanksgiving weekend, they had one power play goal in the month of November. This is not good. I could also see Texas sticking in the bottom two as well. If Ottinger stays in Dallas, Texas has good players, but also has talent that is not playing up to its normal standard. Anthony Lewis, not playing very well. Thomas Nightrod Hartley has struggled in limited time. Alex Petrovic has not looked like the same guy he did in Calgary last year for the Stockton Heat of Calgary. And without Otter in nets, they're going to have to play Colton Point a significant amount of time. And, well, he's never shown that he's been up to that challenge long term. So that's probably not great for them. On the other side of things, Rockford has been sneakily not terrible this year. And maybe some of that is getting rid of their coach and, giving him a promotion to get him out of the way, which is surprising because that's usually not how those kind of things go. But Rockford has sneakily been a resilient team, and a lot of that is on their goaltending in Soderblom. God forbid they ever get, Colin Delia or Subban to look like, guys who have gotten NHL looks at some point. They could have enough goaltending and voodoo to power them to, a fifth spot in that Central Division. Whereas Grand Rapids sure doesn't look like that team. I think Manitoba has enough insulation, enough points in the bank to be able to, hold off even a monumental collapse. Chicago, even though I don't think they're nearly as good as they've been in previous seasons, still is good enough, it looks like. And Nashville doesn't seem too eager to be pulling guys up, at least at this point. Chicago. Carolina doesn't. Nashville's been pretty bouncing guys back and forth with Milwaukee, which may have been some of the problem. But as long as Boldy and Rossi manage to stick in Iowa for a little longer, they should be well insulated from any kind of huge plummet. Although I believe it was Marco Rossi just took a pretty nasty looking spill, but looks to have avoided serious injury there. So in my mind, it's between the bottom four of that division is pretty clearly going to be Grand Rapids, Rockford, Texas, and Milwaukee in some order. And I think it could be Grand Rapids and Texas in the bottom and Milwaukee and Rockford in that 4 and 5 spot.
You know, I'm going to have to agree with you on that, because Grand Rapids, yeah, if you ride Cal Pickard for 80, 85, 90% of your games for the rest of the season, that is not sustainable. It's not. And the fact that they have not even started Caden Fulcher once since calling him up from the Toledo Walleye, I think that kind of speaks volumes as to how hesitant Grand Rapids is, even when they demoted, Broadstrom to Toledo and brought up Fulcher. It's the goaltending is going to be, and your offense can't run through Hirose every single night. He is only one man, and people are going to be like, hey, let's double team this guy because they seem to be getting him the puck a lot, or, the play always runs through him. So, I mean, obviously he's not going to be on the ice for 60 minutes a game, but I mean, he's a good key piece of Grand Rapids offense there. And Grand Rapids, they remind me a lot of Manitoba. Manitoba's figured it out, but early in the season, both Manitoba and Grand Rapids, I noticed, were very kind of inconsistent. Like they had these two identities, and they couldn't figure out what they wanted to be. Like they'd play really hard one period, and then they back off and play real conservative the next. Like like I said, Manitoba seems to have figured it out at least somewhat, but Grand Rapids is still, like you said, and their special teams have gone off a cliff. Yeah, Grand Rapids wouldn't surprise me if they did finish in the bottom. And Texas goaltending is going to be an issue. I know that they're trying Damiani. Riley Damiani is turning on his game, so that's a good offensive sign for Texas. But yeah, I mean, Milwaukee, too much talent to not get it right, and the fact that they've got Connor Ingram trying to get back in the swing of things. I mean, he's taken a lot of losses recently, but he's past 4 games has at least gone 500. But again, you run into the same problem there with the Cal Pickard thing. You don't want to ride your primary goaltender and Mikhail burden him into the ground. So, I mean, the bottom 4 in the Central, it wouldn't surprise me if any of these teams ended up at the bottom, but I can't disagree with your assessment that, Texas and Grand Rapids could end up in the bottom 2 and missing the playoffs. And Rockford, like you said, has surprisingly not has been as terrible as they were last year. So it could end up a lot of different ways. But to agree with you, I mean, Texas and Grand Rapids, don't be surprised if those 2 teams are out of the postseason this year.
All right, I think it's about time we got over to the Best Coast and talk some Pacific hockey. So, Cece, team me up here.
I'd be more than happy to, Shawnee. All right, at Thanksgiving on Thursday, Tucson and San Jose were in the bottom 2. As we alluded to the Barracuda, talking about Evander Kane being relegated there. Those are the bottom 2 in the Pacific as of Thursday. Currently, Tucson has leaped Bakersfield, Colorado, and Abbotsford since then. A little bit of a shift there, but we're going to go with the Thanksgiving Day standings again. That nice little freeze frame, frozen in time. Shawnee, do you think one of Tucson or San Diego makes a move up the standings? And if so, which teams would they replace?
I think you mean San Jose there, but I understand in the outline it says San Diego, and that's my fault.
That's all right. No, yeah, San Jose.
So between Tucson and San Diego, or San Jose, I could see this shaking out a couple of ways. I'm obviously not a big believer in Tucson, but I think if Calvary arriving could boost them if the Yotes ever get healthier and send some guys down. Now, obviously, the Coyotes this year are on a General Patton-esque mission, but they could still send some guys back instead of, playing them 12 minutes a night. I doubt Tucson ever shakes the Jekyll and Hyde label, but I think they could find just enough consistency to hold on to a 7th seed. if the Cuda get an actual boost from Evander Kane and he sticks around and is in the lineup long enough to actually make like a season-long impact, they could make moves as well up the standings. I think of all of the teams that are kind of in that neighborhood in the Pacific, I believe the least in Bakersfield. They've had subpar goaltending without Skinner there, which I think all of us are kind of surprised by. But they also don't have a lot of depth on the roster, and it seems really unlikely that they're going to get reinforcements from Edmonton anytime soon. If they do, we can have a different discussion at that point, as Dylan Holloway, Ryan McLeod, and Stuart Skinner are all waivers exempt. But for right now, they seem to be sticking in Edmonton, and Holloway is still on season opening IR. So we don't know if he's going to be making moves in Edmonton or if they're going to send him down to Bakersfield to see what happens. But I think it's going to be Tucson, Bakersfield, and San Jose in that bottom three of the division in my mind. Colorado seems to be finding its groove. Abbotsford finally has firepower back from Vancouver, plus probably the best goaltending tandem of any of those 5 teams we talked about. So in my mind, it's going to be one of Bakersfield, Tucson, or San Diego that grabs that last playoff spot. And I think I'm leaning towards Tucson, but it's a, dealer's choice of how the 3 of them play out. But I think if I had to pick one, at gunpoint here, I'm probably saying Tucson escapes over San Jose, mostly because I don't believe Evander Kane makes a difference. And San Jose is also, because they have the clown car size roster, they've struggled with consistency, and we said that last year, as well as their NHL club is not seem too high on sending guys back.
Yeah. San Jose, I think, is going to be firmly placed at the bottom of the Pacific. I don't think they're going to get beyond 8 or 9. I mean, I take that back. I mean, they could, go on a streak and win 2 or 3 games and maybe get up to 7th, maybe get up to 6th. I mean, that Pacific division, it's Stockton, Ontario, and everyone else. I mean, we thought it was going to be, you grimaced a little bit.
San Diego is 7-3 in their last 10. They're figuring out that they are actually good. So I am not willing at this point to just say the Pacific is Ontario, Stockton, and everyone else. I still believe in San Diego.
That's fair.
I will hold that one until we are, they've won 5 straight, CC.
They have.
That team, I want to see what they look like against Stockton and Ontario, because they are undisputedly the King Kong and Godzilla of that division. But I think San Diego could be making some moves.
Mothra?
I'm not as familiar with Godzilla lore to know if that's an accurate metaphor, other than Mothra is part of that universe, but we'll go with it. I was thinking Mecha Godzilla, but sure. That's...
I'm not super either. I just know Mothra is one of the villains that Godzilla fights. So,
but I think San Diego is at least starting to establish itself in that class. Henderson, powered by the indomitable will of Logan Thompson to carry that team on his back to victory.
Can confirm.
Yeah, I mean, future 2-time back-to-back Aldridge Bastion Award winner Logan Thompson is going to carry that team. But yeah, I have to believe in Abbotsford and them getting guys back, and the goaltending. Colorado seems like they've at least figured out some of their early season woes. And as a division, the Pacific has a lot of really good power plays, and San Jose cannot kill a power play to save its life.
No.
Or kill a penalty, rather, to save its life.
Yeah.
So that is going to be a huge hindrance for them going forward. I don't think Evander Kane makes as big of an impact on that team season-wide. So I'm going to say San Jose. I don't think Bakersfield is going to get the horses back from Edmonton to continue the path they're on. So I'm going to put everyone above the 2 of them and say it's going to be Bakersfield and San Jose. I mean, I could see outcomes that go the other way. The bottom of the Pacific is a little bit of a mismatch, but I think, in my mind, clearly Bakersfield and San Jose are the worst of the 2 teams there.
And I guess I just don't have a whole lot of faith in Tucson. I mean, they are who we saw that they were last year, and they continue to be just extremely inconsistent, just very, very Jekyll and Hyde. And I know that they've actually won 3 games in a row, which they didn't do all of last season, as abbreviated as it was. But, there's just something about the Roadrunners that doesn't sit well with me. And the fact that they can, beat, a team like an Ontario or a Stockton and then lose to like a San Jose, it's just, it doesn't instill a lot of faith in me, even to make a 7-team playoff. Like I'm thinking Tucson and San Jose in the bottom 2. Even if Bakersfield doesn't get the horses back, like you said, I think they can still figure it out to at least limp along and, push it even to the 7th seed. I think Baco might be the 7th seed. And we'll have to go back and revisit this once the playoffs are actually once they're actually set. It'll be fun to see how our predictions turned out. But Colorado can confirm they tend to get hot like middle of the season, like December, January. They start to figure it out. I mean, 1920, when they were, starting to really put things together, and even with a couple of, ECHLers, contributing against Milwaukee, who was the number 1 team in the league, Colorado could have made a big push. But that's kind of the point, is Colorado can figure it out, and Colorado will make the postseason. Because historically in the AHL, the middle of the year is when they start to piece it together. So all of that to say, forgive my long-windedness, but hey, we're a podcast. It's what we do. Tucson, San Jose, those are my bottom 2, with Baco barely above those 2 as a 7 seed.
I think for me, the only reason I disagree is not because I believe in Tucson, because I've already said I don't. But this isn't so much about Tucson winning as the other 2 losing slower.
Fair.
That's the only way I could think of it. And like I think whoever claims that bottom seed in the Pacific Division playoffs, I mean, the bottom 2 of that division, I think, are probably just going to be, early exit playoff ticket fodder for, Ontario, Stockton, San Jose, or Ontario, Stockton, San Diego, and Henderson. I think those are pretty clearly the best 4 teams in that division. Colorado can flirt with that at times.
Mm-hmm.
They can, dress up as a top team in the Pacific for Halloween, or, something like that for a weekend. But I don't think it's sustainably who they are. Abbotsford, the same thing. But like whoever's taking those 6 and 7 seeds in the Pacific, I think they're just going to be early exit fodder, and can basically sell T-shirts that said, San Jose Barracuda or Tucson Roadrunners, 2021 playoff, we believe, whatever.
What do they believe in? We don't know. But something interesting real quick here at the bottom of the standings, and talking with Colorado head coach Greg Cronin this past weekend, this is kind of an interesting observation. Look at the bottom 4 teams in the Pacific and look at their goals for and goals against. Bakersfield, 39-43. I'm going to skip over Colorado for now. Abbotsford, 36-39. San Jose, 38-55 goals allowed. But Colorado, 53 goals for and 55 goals allowed. Coach Cronin said at the beginning of the season, goaltending was something that needed to be figured out, but they were putting in a lot of goals. So, their scoring was very good. Now they have the opposite problem. Justus Aunanen is figuring out the North American game. He's not allowing 4, 5, 6 goals a game. He's keeping it to 1 or 2 goals. But the problem is that these are 1-goal games. And so they lost 3-2 to Stockton this past weekend, but then they came out on Saturday and won 5-1. So it's like, okay, well, maybe they are going to figure this out a little bit, especially Martin Kaut just got reassigned to the Eagles. So with Kaut back, with Kiefer Sherwood now back on the Eagles, it's like you have top 6 forwards at the AHL level that are actually top 6 forwards. And you're not playing rookies like Andreas Vingerly at a top 6 level when he's probably more of a third line forward. So anyway, that's me on my Colorado pedestal, because obviously it's the market I cover. And
No, but I mean, that makes sense, though. It's easier to figure out and problem solve on defense than it is to put pucks in the net. Right. And that's one of the things that, every coach that gets hired midseason, the first thing is, I'm like, all right, how do we stop the bleeding on defense? That's usually the first goal. Like structuring goal scoring is not nearly as challenging as, or is not nearly as difficult as, or not nearly as simple, rather. There we go. Structuring offense is not nearly as simple as just getting guys to do simple things better to keep pucks out of their own net. And that's so if Colorado is, doing the offense like we think they're capable of, which, as you pointed out with your goals for, goals against point there, they are. They just have to figure out how, a couple things to keep pucks out of their net, whereas all the other teams you mentioned are struggling to do both. So I think that is definitely a feather in the Eagles' cap. And again, they're likely to get reinforcements from Colorado. Like you said, Kiefer Sherwood back, Martin Kaut back. Like, they're going to get talent coming back to them. Whereas, Tucson could maybe, but I don't think Bakersfield is anytime soon. I don't think San Jose is getting too much besides Evander Kane, but we don't expect that to be a season-long thing. That's I think the other big crux too is we know that Colorado is going to get guys back, and the rest of them. Abbotsford's basically at full power now, so this should be when Abbotsford starts to make moves up the standings. But San Jose is probably not getting a big contribution that will stick for them. Neither is Bakersfield. Tucson maybe-ish, and even then, like, the guys they get back are Barrett Hayton, maybe, who's not been great for them. Liam O'Brien, who's a useful presence, but not the star power they need. They're not getting star power back. Whereas like Kaut and Sherwood are star power. Justin Dowling, Justin Bailey are star power. Like, that's, I think that's the big difference here. But I think that's a pretty good place. We could keep going here, but I think we should leave it there for now. Cece, let's kick off the outro.
Yeah, that'll do it. Episode 64. That's it for the show. Thanks for watching and or listening. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and a number of other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs, or pro wrestling programs, at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just go on that website, click the podcast button or the podcast link in the drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website. There's all the podcasts, and you can enjoy a bevy of choices. And with that in mind, thanks for tuning in with us, and making us a part of your day. Appreciate it.
And if you're enjoying listening to the Calder Farmstead or watching the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Audible on Amazon, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Doing so helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found on our Linktree page, which is at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's DYSFUNCTION. So he can make music for you too. Cece, where can people find you?
Well, my name is CC Hockley. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL, and at my personal Twitter account, SEESEEHAWK. That's CC Hawk. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Majority of them are going to be hockey tweets that I tweet out, but I like music. I like the rock band Rush. I've been on a Steely Dan kick as of late, so I've been tweeting out about them recently. But hey, if it keeps me interested, hopefully it's not going to be bullshit for you. Check out my writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at www.fullpresshockey.com. Past couple weeks, I've had the opportunity to go to Henderson at Colorado and Stockton at Colorado. So a couple of good teams coming into Loveland, and some interesting observations. Of course, I go to the nights where the Eagles lose and then bounce back and win the next game. C'est la vie, as it is. Sean, where can the people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SEANOBRIEN81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. My Instagram is mostly pictures of my dog Parker, who is adorable, as well as, my regular surroundings. It's not very hockey related, whereas my Twitter, more hockey musings than anything else, but also some random observations around the world, mostly pop culture takes. You can find my stats work at Tableau at bit.ly/datadump-and-chase. That's all of the fun graphs of all your players that you love and or hate. That's bit.ly/datadump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Cece, take us home.
That will do it for episode number 64, Nintendo 64 of the Calder Farmstead. As always, we thank you for tuning into the show. My name is CC Hockley, and for Sean O'Brien over there, we thank you for tuning in. And as always, keep your stick on the ice.